Hello and welcome. You're watching QTV and you're watching The Week in Review. I'm your host, Ari Darami, and my co-host is Momodu Mboj. Mr. Mboj, once again, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ali.
And before we crack on with the program, let me just say thanks to all the people who contacted us on social media and even the people who stopped me in the street to say how much they enjoyed the program. Thank you for those comments. Now, if you're watching this for the first time, this is how it goes. We had 10 stories this week. Past few weeks, we've had 8. 10 stories, big stories from the week, and we go through them and we discuss them in some detail. So let's get cracking. The first one is all to do with COVID vaccines. Not just anything to do with COVID vaccines. Have a look at this clip.
Especially the media. We should try to sensitize the people so that they understand the danger in this, so they understand, how serious this is. And government, we are very, very serious and we are committed to making sure that our country is healthy. And in doing that, we need the cooperation of the general public. So let us all continue to campaign. And let us all sensitize the people, enlighten them, so that they can come up in their numbers to come and take the vaccine.
As I said there, not just any story about the vaccine, but about His Excellency the President taking the vaccine. And Mr. Mboj, we've been dealing, not just in the Gambia, but in other countries, about this so-called vaccine hesitancy. Seeing the President take it and enjoin people to take it, is that likely to get people queuing up finally?
Well, having seen him take his second jab, I mean, will anybody now doubt the safety of it? He's still alive, isn't he? Well, that's the idea, that with the President taking it, everybody seeing it on TV would inspire people, perhaps reassure them of the safety of it. But we all know that people seem to be quite skeptical of what authority says, because apparently it doesn't seem to be reflecting, as it were, in people's attitudes. Sure. Even the Afrobarometer survey tells you really exactly how people are thinking.
I was going to say, because that one, people said they believe more in prayer than in the vaccine. So is there a way to kind of get people around to thinking like this? I mean, and also what has kind of probably not helped is that in some countries where the Prime Minister or the President took the vaccine, it was shown that in fact they were doing it just for a photo op. They weren't actually taking it at that point. And so that tended to kind of, give some discredit to it.
Then it feeds into already that skepticism they've got, with also fuels, as it were, conspiracy theories and all the rest of it. Absolutely, and you really cannot do that. This is like the time that you want to establish trust.
Yes,
it's particularly in an emergency, isn't it? You need that trust so that people can use information in the right way, so that we can get out of this trouble. Otherwise, it will prolong it, wouldn't it? I mean, the depths.
When we look at this, who are the people who can inspire people to actually have that trust? Is it the health minister? Is it artists, musicians? I mean, just on the previous program, we were talking about artists, everyone from singers, sculptors, poets, being given some money to actually go around and sensitize people, particularly to address this kind of vaccine hesitancy. So is it the President? Is it artists? Is it the Minister of Health? What can convince people?
That's it. Who are the opinion influencers, as it were? We have, I think we've got a few on social media. But you realize that all of the above. That's really what it is. Guess, so everybody, even us ordinary people sitting with your mates, and you might have somebody who is skeptical about these things, then you challenge the reasoning. And you realize that sometimes when you challenge the reasoning, they see how weak their position is. Then hope for the best.
And what was interesting about, somebody like the President, of course he has his supporters, his followers, and I suspect some of them will listen to him and say, well, the President, as you said, he's taken it, he's still alive, and he's telling us it's good, it's efficacious. We have a friend who said that he will never take it, no matter what, but his wife has taken it. And so you have this kind of thing where it's quite difficult because there's not a single type of person who's refusing to take it. It's across the board.
Absolutely, and he will certainly, you're right, he will certainly have his constituency. He will inspire some, to take it. But this is a bit like Brexit, isn't it? It divides the family.
It can divide the family.
It can divide the family. Some on this side, some on the other side. I think all we can do really is just continue to drum home, good arguments. And then challenge, the basis of what, people's skepticisms and see. And hopefully some might say this is perhaps the triumph of hope over experience, fine. But I do tell people sometimes, I said, in certain emergencies, you see, this is going to be the key.
Sure.
Can the government impose it, enforce it?
Well, interesting point you're coming to, because what I was going to say is that some of the people that we spoke to, when I kind of said to them, sort of half jokingly, I said, of course, you realize if you don't get vaccinated, you won't be able to travel out of this country. And so even if the government doesn't impose it, certain travel regulations and certain countries that you want to go to will actually impose it on you. They'll say, well, you can't come to our country unless you can prove that you're vaccinated.
That's a brilliant point, because already we've got this visa requirements, vaccination requirements, in measles, polio, whatever, isn't it? COVID-19?
Yellow fever, which is compulsory.
Absolutely.
And it's a vaccination, and people have been taking it for 40 or 50 years. Nobody's complained. But we've had this point again. The kind of discussion is that I think part of the suspicion that people don't have about something like yellow fever vaccine is that the speed with which they have arrived at a vaccine for COVID-19. People think, oh, come on, how could they in less than a year have come up with a vaccine? And that's a big problem, isn't it?
Yes, but that is not sort of a positive reason for me to doubt it.
Quite.
You know what I mean? So yes, I'm certainly baffled by the speed, but that in itself doesn't invalidate, as it were, the efficacy or the scientific nature of it. So let's separate the two. And we also know from people like Dr. Bittey that actually they had been doing this sort of thing.
Because there are other types of coronaviruses. This
SARS,
is just the latest.
MERS,
yes,
as they call
exactly.
it. So they had started some work there, and then technology had to allow them to fast track some bits, as we put it the other day. So there's a good argument, there's good reason why we've done it so quickly.
Sure.
To me, there are sound reasons. I've been persuaded.
And let's hope everybody is persuaded, because, as I say, I think there'll come a time when you won't be able to travel anywhere unless you have it. So this one, we'll keep watching it, and we'll see, having heard the President speak, how many people now go on and get vaccinated.
Particularly when we add that the current stock we have, it will expire at a given date. And I think the last time I spoke to some staff from the Ministry of Health, I think by June, July, it will expire. So we need to go out and get vaccinated. We need to go out.
And just on closing, I don't want to scare anybody, but there's an article on the BBC, and the headline is, how come Seychelles is the most vaccinated place on earth, and yet they've just seen a spike in COVID cases. So, hey, we want to watch. Anyway, thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And now on to our next story, completely different story. And this is about access to justice. And actually, if you live in the Gambia, in many countries, as opposed to living in the West, many people don't seem to know their rights and about how they can access justice. And so there's a project which is ongoing right now. Have a look at this, and it'll give you some more detail about it.
We are delighted to have you gathered here today to recognize this groundbreaking moment in the history of our country's justice system. It is impressive to acknowledge the huge wealth of resources, time, and expertise that institutions and leaders like you are willing to offer for the benefit of people whose societies have written off and oftentimes forgotten.
There you had just a snippet. So what's impressive and interesting about this particular one is that actually you've got both inmates and prison officers being instructed over, I think, 3 weeks training on their rights. A novel idea, certainly including inmates in it.
Absolutely. Who knows? They can actually leave, go and enroll at the university to do law or something. They just never know. Perhaps the young one. Oh, absolutely. Anything to improve the whole machinery of justice.
Indeed, yes.
You know, we will do. And it's important for inmates and the prison officers really to be getting together to understand each other. See, we often say that really when I'm a prisoner, I do not lose my humanity, I lose my liberty.
Sure, yes.
Absolutely.
That is absolutely true. I mean, because in again, sorry to keep drawing these things, but in the UK or in America, for all the fact that they have huge prison populations, most of the prisoners know their rights, and in fact they will tell prison officers or police officers, "I know my rights."
Absolutely.
You hardly ever hear that here. People think that if I've been imprisoned, then I deserve whatever I get coming. So it's a good thing that causes like this are happening, surely.
Absolutely, and other bits. Hopefully, they will be provided with the opportunity to learn trades or read books. I mean, people like Malcolm X, they learn so much in university. So
That's
we
right.
do.
In prison.
Prison was the university.
Yeah.
So you do have that part as well, that other angle, where they go into prison and they learn all sorts of things and come out better people. Or you've got the other part where they go in and keep on learning how to become better thieves, better burglars, and
better criminals.
Better criminals. They learn all tricks. So it depends on how the prison system works. It is really in our interest to make it work.
But the thing is, how do you square this with the fact that in some countries, possibly even here, I've not done a survey, there's still an element where people think it's a punitive thing, that almost you going there and kind of improving yourself is almost anathema to some people, like, go in there and suffer. How do you change that mindset, which prison officers come from our society, and so they probably have that mindset going into it. And the society, many people in society have that mindset. You go there, it's punishment.
Yes.
You're not going there to enjoy life. How do you change that?
Absolutely. But this is the difference between revenge and justice.
Yeah.
So let's go back to concepts, to bright little concepts. Just as we said earlier, you lose your liberty, not your humanity. So I must treat you in a certain way. And justice requires me to give respect, as it were, with these democratic principles, working within these democratic principles, and this modern sensibility that you have the person is an autonomous and has certain inalienable rights.
They're still human, and they have
absolutely humans.
rights.
Absolutely. So we have to take that as given.
Yeah.
Really, we have to take that as given. And it doesn't matter what people think. People can think all sorts of things. The state must be an ethical version of people. You see, the state cannot follow. Then you are not really leading.
You're not leading.
No, it cannot work like that. You must listen, but there are times when you have to take your people and lead them in the direction, as Tolstoy once said, lead them in the direction that humanity is going.
Yes,
they may not always like it, but...
and it's true. I mean, because in America right now you have this big debate about should prisoners be allowed to vote. And it's kind of splitting the country almost down the middle, where some people feel that no, they should not ever. If they come out, then they can vote just, but while they're in prison, they should not. And I guess we're going to be having that debate somewhere down the line here in the Gambia.
Absolutely. I have to say, when the bill, if I have to vote in anything like that, I'll vote that they have the right to vote.
Yeah, and why not?
Absolutely. I mean, treat me, if you really want to rehabilitate me.
Yes.
So create normal conditions for me to adapt to that sort of thing.
Yes. Don't, I'm still part of society. I'm not a pariah. Don't make me a pariah.
Yes. Do not reinforce any kind of stigma. Then nothing is going to happen. I mean, what? You're going to hold me there until I die, or when you let me out, maybe I've been hardened by the treatment I had in there. So we have to, if it's certain in our objectives, what exactly do you want to achieve in locking you up? Of course, one part is, for instance, dangerous criminals, murderers. You want to prevent that from happening. Again, it's got that element and all of that. But still, you're a human being. There's a certain way that I must treat you. One must behave with a sense of honor. Never mind what you are.
So going back to this particular one, a year down the line, we're very good, almost famous in Africa for launching things, projects, validating them, and then a year or two down the line is crumbled. Are you hopeful that something like this will actually take root and become embedded?
Yes, qualified hope, in the sense that with us media as well, we must keep them on their toes. We know how government
I was going to say we would follow this up.
Absolutely, we'll have to follow it up.
Yeah.
So this is really the function that we can provide for society. All these civil authorities, these institutions will make all sorts of promises. We have to hold them to account. So luckily now we have a free press, and hopefully it will continue. So this is really, that's why I call it qualified hope. Depending on what we do. You know what I mean? Maybe that will force institutional governments to act.
and for us in the media, it's our job to hold their feet to the fire to make sure that they stick with what they're going to do. So once again, thanks for that. Again, we will watch this one. On to our next and our third story. This is to do with His Excellency the President going around and visiting some sites. What kind of sites? Have a look.
Following the brief stop in Masakonko, he proceeded to the road construction site linking Kir Oldi, Sarejibi, Batindar and Yao in Sierra North, the 8.9 kilometer Kaur Jimbala Road and the 38 kilometer Sabasu Koto, Bambali and Gain Sanjal Sarakunda Road. Residents from beneficiary communities expressed appreciation to government for bringing what some of them describe as impactful projects that will facilitate transportation and boost economic activities in the region. However, the President expressed concern about the slow pace of works, reminding contractors that they are already behind schedule and the rainy season is fast approaching.
They are behind schedule. The President reminded contractors, Mr. Mboj, and what I'm about to say, I don't say with any kind of sense of superiority, but 3-4 weeks ago I drove around the country and I realized how small the Gambia was. I come from Sierra Leone, which is a small country in itself, but much bigger than the Gambia. And what surprised me was how poor the kind of road infrastructure is, given the small size of the country. And yes, His Excellency the President is upset that so little progress has been made. But the question I want to ask you as a Gambian, why is it these projects were never done or taken on before? What priorities did they have that was so immense that something like just giving people ease of access, goods, services, etc., why were they not done?
have you forgotten about the Oga who was in power?
What he would have benefited, even the Oga?
Absolutely, but distracted by all sorts of things. This is what mismanagement. This is what bad governance does.
Sure.
You know, we've just had the Janneh Commission and others. We've seen the billions. Now, imagine if those billions had been spent in these things, in a thought experiment. So we've seen exactly why these things were not built. We got it from the Janneh Commission. We're getting from the RRC and from all the international bodies who have studied. We're beginning to see now why the country is the way it is. This is a legacy.
And he has his supporters still.
Yes.
And because of that, part of the discussion argument that I have with people in the office is I show them a video like that. And I said, you know, if he'd done as much as he should have done in 22 years, this would be redundant.
Absolutely.
You would not be seeing what we've just seen.
Absolutely.
And there's much more to do besides this. So what is it?
Well, just look at Barrow within a short period, building all over the place. So there is, if at least the most skeptical, the most cynical can say that at least there is some semblance of governance going on right now. So things are happening in their own slow way. Absolutely.
And you know, I know people sometimes get cynical and skeptical about, but if you look at something like the National Development Plan, actually, there's quite a lot in there that if it gets delivered, you know, would actually completely change this country for the better. But you know, there are skeptics who say, oh, you know, this is kind of what politicians do, and they say they promise. But you look at something like this, at least, as you said, he's doing it.
Oh, absolutely. And perhaps the one criticism one might have with National Development Plan and calling it priorities. You know, really, when you prioritize, maybe you take 2 or 3 key things. But can you imagine prioritizing about 7, 8 stuff? I mean, that's a bit, I'm stretching it.
And also what's interesting is that something like health, the health sector, which was in a very porous state, COVID-19 has forced us to put that as a priority. More ambulances, I think. I saw him saying 70 more ambulances, the health minister, in another thing to go. And so that was not, you know, up there when it should have been. You know, the cliche about a healthy nation being a wealthy nation.
Absolutely. Health, education, economy. I mean, one suspects if you get those right, a lot of other things, they're sort of like gateway, as it were, sectors. Perhaps a lot of other sectors would also be right. You know,
because I mean, I agree. There are different sectors that you can bring into this interplay, but we've also featured on QTV News schools that were in, well, I can only say that you wouldn't send your enemy's dog to some of these schools. There was in such terrible condition. Why if we consider education as being important, as being a priority, yes, roads, bridges, they're good for linking people, but what about schools?
Absolutely, that must feature very highly. We know that, and then also the human resources. You know, the physical infrastructure. That's one thing, and then the human resources. I have to say this. I have no disrespect to tertiary education instructors, but I was head of one institute, tertiary institute, and then we would deal with high schools. You know, we had reason to liaise with high schools here and there. So we'll meet teachers and all of that. The quality of the teachers, they themselves need help.
I found that out when
training. They need, you know. So there's a huge, really deep-seated, wide, far-reaching difficulties that we have. So a lot of people perhaps do not look at the thing sort of deeply, but have a superficial, sort of superficial way of looking at our society right now. But to some people, it's damage to the very core in many ways. Damage to the very core.
Yeah, and so I think, you know, site visits are good. They're nice, but it'd be nice to see some better hospitals, better schools.
But at least this time he said he was disappointed with the slow pace. Now I'm beginning to like that. The last time he went round, he was satisfied. Then, and we thought it doesn't quite work like that. Most presidents who do this, afterwards you get a few sackings.
Absolutely.
You have to be serious about these things. So we're getting there.
And he's come out and he's named them and he shamed them.
Absolutely.
Because people knew the places he visited. And he said, you know, the percentage of development that's gone on in the particular project, one of them 10%, another 17%, another 20%. That's quite low. Some of them have been 7-8 months down the line, and he expected more.
Absolutely.
So
this is exactly what we want to see.
That's what we want to see. More like that, please, Mr. President. Now on to something else. Much talked about. Everywhere you go, even before we came on air, people were talking about what? Crime. Have a look at this.
Captain Malik Sanyang, the Deputy Public Relations Officer of the Gambia Armed Forces, had a response to recent calls to bring more security forces to such as the Gambia Armed Forces to increase security.
You have military establishments in all these places, and they would join them during their patrols, and of course they will give them all the necessary backup that they would need from the military. Just to say, because most of these incidences that we are seeing right now are criminally related, the police will of course have to naturally take the lead. Yes, we have responsibilities, but we have a limited police duty responsibility given to us.
The police will have to take the lead. Mr. Ambuj, that particular clip from that story, because of the debate that's been going on every day now, stories of serious crime, and then people start thinking the unthinkable, bring in the army. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, we've heard there that the army does have a policing role, but the general role of the police is for them to police, not for the army.
Absolutely, no army stuff. Let's move away from that.
We thought we'd had enough of the army.
We have enough of the army. Let them stay at the barracks.
Sure.
And strengthen the police.
Sure.
Train them. You see, there are ways of doing all of these things, really. How much has been spent? I mean, how much are they spending? What sort of training? Is it the right sort of training? You don't get that sense that we're treating it as an emergency and putting resources in the right place. So that is why it appears as if they cannot do their job. So what is going on now? They're going around arresting all of these people. Okay, fine. What crimes have they committed? How are you treating them in custody? And then would you release them after 72 hours? Are you observing their rights? And then afterwards the prosecutions, the convictions. We really do not know. There's a shift, but we cannot judge yet the effect. How effective would it be? People are interested in effectiveness.
Yes, I mean, and they gave you know, 888 people, I don't know whether that was 888, but something like that, that had been arrested. Yes, about 400 had been released without charge because they were, but then there were several hundred and something that were arrested for drugs. And when you looked in the kind of finer detail, it's like ganja and stuff like that. There are countries legalizing it.
We were just talking about it yesterday.
You know, and we're arresting people for it and including them amongst, you know, people are concerned about serious crime, hardened criminals. And, you know, some of the stories we've heard, again, there might be isolated one, but some of them are quite serious, you know, murders and so on, rapes. That's what people are concerned about, not somebody caught smoking a stick of weed.
No, absolutely. I mean, people are talking about it, you know, in our chats, in our conversations. This sort of it comes up all the time, and we're like, they're possibly getting mainly these petty criminals, people who sell drugs. I mean, weed, as it were, in the street corner. Whereas the person who's going to come and break into your house with a machete and stuff like that. No, you're not going to see that person going to these identifiable areas, really, clearly hotspots. Everybody knows clearly identified hotspots. People know them and that sort of thing. So the serious stuff, one is not really sure if this will have any dent on the serious stuff.
I mean, what I found slightly amusing was that some of the places they raided were called known criminal hideouts. So what, they have a kind of criminals HQ that you go and
absolutely
you go and raid. But again, to think about other countries, when this sort of thing happened, whether it was imagined or real, in the UK, people started saying, we want to see police patrolling our areas to make us feel safe. Is that part of the solution?
That is a smart one. That's a good one, because we know that certain crime hotspots, if you have police presence all over, it tends to be a deterrent to the commission of crime. Apparently, when I spoke to CDC say, the host of Kachadula, when he was a police officer in England, they used to do stuff like that. Just go to an area, just park their car. And then you're scared when the police are around. Because of the presence. So we know that. That would be a good thing, certainly.
And you know, we talk about that sort of thing being good, and we also talk about a challenge in terms of resources, possibly not manpower. But one of our colleagues, I won't name him, but and this is a real story, when their house was being broken into, and they happened to phone the police in Fajara. First of all, they couldn't find the place, which is another topic for another day. But when they had been told where it was, and they said, well, you know, these guys are still trying to break in and we're scared, they said, we haven't got a vehicle to come.
Absolutely.
So how serious?
So this is the key. It is extremely serious. We must have a mobile patrol unit. That's really one of the ways that you can defeat burglaries, as it were, because you're rapid response
and
motorbikes and that sort of thing. That's it. So, but this is the key. We're just tired of we don't have any resources. One understands that, but you must also be prepared to take the consequences of that. Now, what you're going to have in the homes? Vigilantism. You hear people talking about it now. I'm going to get my machete. I'm going to get my cutlass.
Well,
you hear people talk
more than just talking about it. They've been unfortunately posting videos. I mean, I refuse to watch them. People always say to me, "Oh, you might be upset about this." I'm like, "Okay, don't show it to me." But you know, people have been sharing them. I just delete them when they come into my inbox. But that's the alternative. People will say, well, you're not doing your job, we'll do it for you.
This is the consequence of it.
And I'll tell you this again, 2 weeks ago, right outside the gate at Q Cell here, I came upon a guy being beaten in the street by about 10 people, claiming he was a thief. And the guy was saying, let me explain. Nobody was even giving him a chance to explain anything. They were just slapping him and kicking him right outside our gate.
This is the problem with vigilantism. You know, sometimes they can even get it wrong
and
beat up somebody who is innocent.
That's right.
So the state structures must work. Otherwise, there would be a kind of quasi-anarchy, if you know what I mean. People taking the law into their own hands, and that is not what you want. So the state must wake up. Yes, the resources are limited, but I must try to make the best out of what I have. This is really would challenge your creativity, your imagination, your dedication. It will challenge all sorts of things. So in Africa right now, let's wake up. Any institution, you are never going to have all the resources you want. It doesn't work like that.
Competing factors for those funds.
Let's wake up. There's a certain sacrifice that one must do at a particular time, really, to build it up.
Indeed,
so if we're going to complain about resources, man, we were just going round in circle.
Quite.
Nothing is going to happen.
It will never
So
change.
how do I defeat that? How do I solve that problem?
Sure.
So do I need to go and take a course in sort of resource mobilization? I think we should be asking now our political parties, what is your resource mobilization plan? Because that must be at the very heart of the planning.
Yes, and I don't think I'm giving anybody ideas by saying I suspect crime will play a big part in the campaigns for the
Absolutely.
upcoming elections.
And it should.
And I'm sure it will. Thanks for that, Mr. Mboch. And now on to our fifth story. Again, something that I was quite interested in, statistics and demographic survey to do with health. Have a look at this.
For us at UNFPA, we're already working with our regional office and the Ministry of Finance on investment cases. What do we need to do? How do we translate these results into valid programs to make sure that we end all preventable maternal deaths in the Gambia? We met the unmet need for family planning, and indeed, very importantly, we end every form of gender-based violence against our women and girls, including female genital mutilation and child marriage.
And there you heard Kunle Adeni talking. In fact, I'm about to kick myself because I was going to bring in to the studio the survey. It's this thick, literally this thick. And it's quite impressive. And it's only for 2019 to 2020. But they've gone into some depth in trying to survey the country in order that they can actually address certain things to do with health. And people's health and safety, as in physical well-being. And I was quite impressed, but then I looked and I couldn't find one before. So is it that we hadn't done one before 2019, 2020?
Possibly, maybe that was the case. But good thing we've done it now.
Yeah, and indeed.
And it's comprehensive.
It is comprehensive.
And this is it. You need data for policy.
Yeah. Well, that's the point I was going to come to. That before that, and because if it had been absent, how were they formulating policy without having done a survey of this nature? And you need the data in order to know where the areas of intervention are and so on. Without it, it's
we'll keep mum on that one. How they've been formulating policy. Absolutely, we know that. We suspect it. I mean, most people you talk to, can you give me the statistics on this or that? They really wouldn't know, and they're in certain positions where they should know.
They ought to know.
To get the clear picture. So, but this is it. Fine, completely. Whatever happened in the past, now we are moving forward.
Sure.
We just hope that the habits have changed and will really be doing more surveys, getting more data on all sorts of areas or sectors, and then we use these results, these findings to formulate our policy, really. And then this one was quite impressive, quite interesting.
Sure.
I like the maternity bit, the family planning areas. Then you see socially, social thinking, how things are moving.
Yeah.
Interesting there.
There's hope. Thanks for that, Mr. Mboch. And I once worked in the UK's Economic Statistics Planning Division, and trust me, statistics are very important. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have 5 more stories. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching QTV and you're watching the Week in Review with myself, Ade Darami, and my co-host, Mamadou Mboj. Mr. Mboj, thank you for your intervention on the 5. We've got to crack on with the next 5. And this one, nothing to do with Gambia, well, not directly or possibly not even indirectly, but Spain-Morocco migration tension. What am I talking about? See this.
This has resulted in Spain gearing up her diplomatic pressure on Rabat as the Prime Minister flew into Quetta to restore order in the North African enclave. About half of the migrants have been sent back to Morocco by the Spanish government. Since then, Spain has enforced and deployed an estimated 6,000 troops to the beaches, operating 24 hours a day. Spain's top diplomat summoned Morocco's ambassador to express her displeasure as Moroccan security turned a blind eye to what the Deputy Prime Minister, Carmen Calvo, described as an attack on our border. The border between Morocco and Spain is a popular entry point that has enticed many to use it as a way of transit or route to irregularly migrate into Spain in search for a greener pasture.
You know, when I see a story like this, there's a kind of cynical side of me that says it serves these colonizers right. To all intents, this is Morocco, really, an enclave that Spain has claimed for itself, and there's just a fence separating it, and people have breached it in record numbers because of low tide and literally just scaling the fence.
Absolutely, and I was reading this piece in Deutsche Welle, and the analysts there suggesting that because of it's got a political connection somewhere. The Polisario Front, the leader is currently in Spain receiving treatment, Brahim Ghali. So Morocco is a bit worried there. So apparently they deliberately reduced the forces in Quetta for people to go in. Morocco is worried because of it wanted international recognition that, you know, it's control over Western Sahara. But now imagine the Polisario Front, their leader in Spain, in an EU country.
Yes, indeed. And so the Spanish have been kind of, not exactly backtracking, but just saying it's a humanitarian gesture.
Absolutely.
He's ill and he's being treated here. It does not show support, either tacit or otherwise, for Polisario and thing. But I said indirectly it doesn't have a link with the Gambia, but actually the migrants who've been making the crossing, from what we've seen and heard, have come from many countries. I suspect there are some Gambians there.
Absolutely, because with these things now, everything has been internationalized. It's a global village, isn't it? So really, yes, one wouldn't be surprised at all. So there is this wave of people wanting to leave, going to Europe. I mean, there are all sorts of schemes to stem the tide, but somehow...
I was almost tempted not to show it because I didn't want to give anybody ideas, but I just said they don't need me to give them ideas about this. So
it's just the zeitgeist somehow, this wave. I mean, we'll see what happens. I don't know.
We'll see. I spoke to somebody today when I went down the road before we came on the program, and I had some documents in my hand. One of them was my British passport, and she said, "Oh, if I had one of those, Gambia would never see me again."
Imagine that.
That kind of, as you said, it's in the air. That kind of thinking.
It's in the air. Right.
So it's a pity. But anyway, Spain, Morocco. I think this one will run and run, and it will be interesting to see what happens in the days and weeks ahead. Now on to something else, which is quite. It's a kind of global menace, and the Gambia is not exempt from it. What am I talking about? Drug trafficking. Interpol recently issued a report that was quite an interesting one. Have a listen, have a look.
Africa has recorded many record busts in recent years, and it's seen as a transit route for illegal drugs from South America to Europe. In September 2019, in nearby Guinea-Bissau, police announced they had seized more than 1.8 tons of cocaine hidden in flour bags in the biggest seizure in the country's history. In January 2021, large amounts of suspected cocaine, worth an estimated $88 million, were also seized in the Gambia, believed to be on transit, bound for Europe. At the time, it was described as the largest ever drug seizure in the country's history.
Largest ever drug seizure in the Gambia's history, the one that we remember from January. Mr. Mboj, this is important because we were talking about the other thing about zero crime, people being busted for. This is the serious end of the drug trade, surely.
Absolutely. These are the big ways, 100 million euros, I've read somewhere. It's a highly lucrative business.
And it fuels other things.
It fuels other things.
Because if you're transporting that sort of drugs,
Absolutely.
you then buy guns to protect
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
And that fuels the kind of the arms trade in our region and sub-region.
And they have money, they can corrupt
people,
corrupt
and
public officials.
Sure.
Absolutely. So this is it. So fantastic, really, that they've done this. They've confiscated this. I wonder what they're going to do with the drugs. you know. So this is. But again, to stem the tide of the drug trade, given how lucrative it is, given the sort of people who tend to be involved and on all the rest of it. It's a huge battle.
It's a massive battle. I mean, there was one of the party leaders of one of the political parties here who was making the claim, it made the front page of a couple of newspapers, that the Gambia was becoming a drugs hub. I'm not sure it's become a drugs hub just because of one huge significant bust. If there'd been several or a few, then you could say yes. But generally, of course, Guinea-Bissau, we all know, had become a kind of almost a narco state because of the way. But how serious is the menace, given that we don't have a navy to patrol our coastlines, and you know, security generally is weak. And as we said, if you can afford 100 million in drugs, you can bribe people to get it through borders and checkpoints.
Gambia's been a transit point for a very, very long time. Actually, we've been reading all the reports for Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, absolutely, they call it that West Africa hub, as it were. We are part of it. So maybe now we can begin to do something about it. And you're right, we do not have the navy. Sure. So how can we get the help so that we can stop it? That should be a priority. But this place has been a transshipment point for a very long time.
And it may be so, and of course to complicate it even more is that our coast, the kind of Gulf of Guinea coast, has seen more piracy than the kind of Somalia coast, which was always the place that. So that might concentrate the minds of the international community to actually help us patrol our waters. We'll watch this one. And now, if you've listened, heard me talk on radio, on TV in the Gambia, you know that traffic is an obsession of mine. Yes, anyway, I won't bore you anymore. Have a look at this clip.
Undoubtedly, such training courses are important, significant, and can greatly add to the professionalism of our officers in traffic control and management. Perhaps, a year from now, we can assess whether unfit cars have been taken off the roads and the accident rate has reduced significantly. However, without a well-paid, funded, professionally trained and equipped police willing to deploy such training on our roads, this will prove to have been a pointless exercise.
Yeah, the training's fine, it's fantastic, but are they going to implement it? Are they going to enforce it? Stonebridge, just now, in another context, we're talking about poorly paid people. If you stop me on the road and my car is belching out smoke when it ought not to be, I can give you a few $, and I'm on my way.
I was talking to
How do we address that?
I was talking to one taxi driver the other day. He said to me, hey, look, when I'm caught, you know, on any traffic violation, I'm taken to court, I'll probably pay $1,500, $2,000, whatever. But with the police officer, I can give him $300, $400 and go away. Yeah. So they are being rational in their own way. So the problem is that it's not, you're just banging your head against a brick wall when they keep telling people, no, you shouldn't be giving bribes, you shouldn't be doing that. I don't think it's going to work that way for now.
No,
I think for now, really, we need a tougher, stronger state. I am of that sort. Yeah. We need a tougher state, really, to bring things to order. Yeah. The idea that people must change, must behave in a certain way, that's a longer-term project.
Sure.
Changing attitudes is a longer-term project.
Sure.
So the state must act now, otherwise we'll all suffer.
There are certain things that we have to keep in mind. You know, the police, they've been trained. We say, oh, you know, they don't have this, they don't have that. But at some point, we have to think beyond that. We have to get smart. We have to make do with the resources we do have. You talked about the taxi driver example, and you know, I've seen it myself. Literally an hour before I came on air, along Kairaba Avenue. 2 cars, it's quite funny. They crashed into each other. That wasn't the funny bit, was they crashed in front of 2 policemen. We were behind the 2 that crashed, and it crashed in front of 2 policemen. And we were kind of joking that, wonder how they're going to resolve this when the police are on hand and so on. And, you know, straight away, one of the policemen got a brick and started demarcating the tire marks where the cars had collided. And, of course, the 2 drivers got out and wanted to fight. But to go back to the police and the traffic police, the training is fine, it's good. But the implementation, and actually what made me want a reporter to do that story this week was that on my way to work on Monday, I saw some children going to school, nicely turned out in their school. And next to them, there were 2 cars belching out smoke that was actually covering the children. I was disgusted. I was horrified. And I thought, you know, if we were serious, those cars should be off the road. But we're not serious about this, are we?
I mean, absolutely. And how many times have you seen sort of a huge truck just break down in the middle of the road?
Well, there was one in Sukuta that was there for 3 days this week.
and that's it, it can be there for 3 days. Sure. I mean, stuff like that. The inconvenience to other people. So we use public space at our own convenience. Never mind the inconvenience and causing others. Sure. All I can say is, hey, look, I've broken down. What do you want me to do? Yeah. In a sort of brusque, rude, almost provincial manner. This lack of manners. Sure. Perhaps there should be some consequences. You know what I mean? Yeah. We'll come and clamp. Maybe the local authorities can be given more power. They help in how to deal with traffic and some of these inconveniences.
I mean, what was interesting about this is that you know, one of the officials from the police force, traffic police, who was at that training and gave we couldn't show the whole report, but he said that, you know, a lot of what they do is recorded manually. But the German police who were involved in the training have actually given them things like handheld speed guns that they can point at cars that are speeding and stop and find them. These are the sorts of things. But you wonder how many they've been given, and you wonder how effective they will be, and also the whole thing about maintenance. Will they keep them maintained?
Absolutely. Yes, we've been talking about these people, and this is always the worry. How is it going to happen? How is it? Would it change outcomes? Would it change their approach to work? Would it change their effectiveness and all of that? In theory, it should, but we have seen that in practice. So with most of these things, we'll just perhaps give them the benefit of the doubt and see if we're going to get any difference, sure, in the way they're doing things.
Like everything else, we'll wait and see.
Absolutely.
And evaluate, and we'll come back to that. I've no doubt about it down the line. And now Cuba and Gambia and the ties between the 2 countries. They've been friendly for quite a long time, and you might even recognize the voice that's in this story. Have a look.
Debt with Africa that we are not going to pay never. That is that a lot of Africans went to Cuba as slaves and to other countries. But in the case of Cuba, they fought for the Cuban independence just together, side by side to the Cubans.
When Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990, his first trip outside South Africa in July 1991 was to Havana, Cuba, to meet Fidel Castro, to thank him for helping end apartheid in his country. Regarded in the West as an oppressor of his own people, Castro and Cuba in Africa, however, represent more of a liberator than an oppressor.
More of a liberator than an oppressor. Mr. Mboj, you and I think we know a lot about Cuba, but I think even you and I were surprised by what the ambassador said, that Africans had joined them.
Absolutely.
In their independence struggle.
Missed that angle.
Yeah.
The revolution 1959 became successful and it toppled Batista.
Yeah.
So exactly. So Africans fought in that as well. And it was afterwards that I learned, because I was previously I was ignorant about Cuba in many ways, until we looked into the details and we thought, wow, David behaved like a Goliath.
Very much so. I mean, because another statistic that came out in that is their literacy rate. 99.99% can read and write.
Absolutely.
It's amongst the 0.1% highest in the world. Yeah.
If our revolutions had gone well, African countries would have been like Cuba.
Yeah, quite.
It's just this is the failure of the revolution that should have happened. Maybe if Cabral had lived, he would have created a Cuba
in Bissau and Cape Verde.
Guinea-Bissau and then so they were deadly serious. They were serious.
Sure.
Brought in science into the heart of the as it were, the revolution, and then that was what they tried to export.
Sure.
Che wanted to export that.
Indeed.
So you had thousands when they left finally in 1991. More than 500,000 had fought in the wars.
That's right.
Thousands who had died, and they left Angola without a single diamond.
Yeah.
Without anything.
Yes, quite.
So absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, they were not
driven by an ideology.
Sure.
That's the drive. If we had that sort of drive, Africa would have been entirely different.
Sure.
But they show us up.
And the thing one has to ask is that given the giant, you talked about it, David, the Goliath that has been hovering over Cuba since the revolution, America, the disgrace, really, of the still imposed sanction. I mean, America trades with all sorts of countries, countries that have similar governments to Cuba, but not with Cuba.
Absolutely.
I mean,
the embarrassment of Bay of Pigs, for instance, that sort of thing, that was really where it all started.
Right.
So in spite of, I call it the chokehold, they've been doing all sorts. Yet Cuba managed to survive because they were serious. The little that they had, they could rally their people together. And, you know, we talk about their medical brigade. Science is at the very heart of what they do.
Absolutely.
Organizational ability, all the sort of stuff that we lack. So that was why they could survive for this long.
Sure.
Because the formula is resilient. Sure. It's working. Because the most powerful nation wanted to crush you, still cannot crush you after 60 years or so. So there must be something there that we should study. It should be our model in many ways.
Good one. Thanks for that, Mr. Mboj. And that brings us nicely onto our last story. I particularly like this one because it's about citizens doing things for themselves and not waiting for government. Have a look.
The gesture promotes the phrase charity begins at home and is welcomed by the beneficiary community. According to the contractor, the project cost of $210,000 and the light poles stretch over a distance of 1 kilometer. This initiative came at a time when majority of the Gambians are worried by reports suggesting an apparent increase in serious crimes in our communities, including rape, murder, theft, and burglary. Parmalaf Mane, on behalf of the Alcalo, says the community is thankful to the Almighty Allah for the blessings of having street lights. He described the lights as a dream come true, saying that they have been working in the dark at night time. He calls on others to emulate the sponsor of the...
We hear this a lot, calling on others to emulate the sponsor. Street lights, solar street lights, $210,000 and over a kilometer. Why are more either government, big business, not sponsoring these sorts of things? I mean, look at the way the community embraced it and said, we now feel safe just because we have light in our community.
Absolutely. So yes, this is the difficulty, isn't it? You expect government to provide these public social amenities.
It's not expensive either.
It's not
listening
expensive
to that.
to do that as well. But again, it's not bad. It's easier to do these things when the scale is smaller.
Yes,
it's a village. It's stuff like that. Yeah. So if a group of philanthropists, whoever wants to do stuff like that, it adds up. Yes. It helps.
But why do we not use more solar lighting across the country anyway? The amount of sunlight we get.
That should be perhaps our strategy, our energy strategy, to gradually move towards solar and that sort of thing. Perhaps even in most of the hinterland, that they don't have lights now. So the initiation, what we introduce first would be solar. So you just change the technology, don't bother putting the lights that we have here, and see how you can change the rest. So this is it. Government will be slow in all sorts of ways. It is, but again, what people can do, well, we can do that in itself. Nobody can knock it.
And that's part of the reason why I wanted that story to feature, really, because for my own selfish reasons, I wanted to inspire other people, other communities, to say, actually, let's reach out to our people in the diaspora and say, look, what they did over there, why don't we do it here?
Absolutely, and just target villages. This is a very, very quite small country. Just geographically zone target this place at this time, that place at other time, that place at other time, stuff like that. The kind of diaspora fund. That's one. But guess what? I heard the talking about it, the discussions, and somebody was saying that, oh, the thieves, they'll soon steal that.
They'll steal that.
I couldn't believe it. The citizen immediately. I couldn't believe it.
I think on that note, we have to end it there. And thank you once again, Mr. Mboj, for your insights on all 10 stories. And to our viewers and those who listen on radio, thank you for viewing and thank you for being with us. You've been watching QTV, The Week in Review. Until next time, it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.